Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. Now that my 2 informative videos are done for the day, it's time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And a number of members of my audience have awared me. And yes, I can hear the screeching down below in the comments. Awared isn't a real word. You need to say make aware. Made aware. Awared is one of my catchphrases, guys. Deal with it. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing. Work on skilling up my crafting a little bit. And let's talk about Canelo Alvarez. And I know all my Latino followers are going to give me an A for effort on my amazing pronunciation there. You're going to be like, dude, this gringo needs to, not like try to use that accent. All right, guys, I apologize for that. It wasn't very good. I'll work on it, though. Now, that being said, Canelo is a boxer from Mexico who has tested positive for clenbuterol. Now, that's not particularly unusual. What's unusual is that he is claiming that it's from tainted meat and that a bunch of athletes in Mexico have run into this problem. He's got a doctor signing off on it, trying to get WADA to agree with it. It looks like WADA may be accepting his story because he's got a doctor with it and everything. Which kind of highlights the nonsense of testing in sports and stuff in general. Look, anyone with 2 brain cells to rub together who knows how all this works knows drug abuse and beating testing is pretty common in tested sports. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm calling it like it is. Let's just accept reality. People who are making big money, who know they can cheat and get away with it, are going to cheat because they're making millions of extra dollars to do so. There's a whole business around getting around drug testing. It's an industry. There's an entire industry built around it. And we know this from other people who've been popped and talked about it and everything else, the tobacco labs incident and everything else. There's a massive multi-million-dollar, possibly billion-plus-dollar industry at this point around just beating drug testing in sports. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just calling it like it is. But here's the sort of nonsense you get too. You also can get doctors to help you too. Well, these levels are indicative of trace amounts found in meat. Really? You guys really and truly believe that you could get enough clenbuterol in your system to test for trace amounts from meat? And I want people to think about that. You do understand. A lot of larger animals, like horses and cows, are not given human doses of these various substances, whether it's anabolics or clen. They are given much, much lower doses because they respond much better. Clen is one of those substances. And it's not that commonly used for any sort of commercial meat. In fact, it's almost counterintuitive. It's almost counterintuitive because it would make the meat a lot leaner. It would reduce feed efficiency in a feedlot. So it almost doesn't make sense. And I am from a ranch. My family are ranchers. I have worked on a cattle ranch. And I can tell you I cannot envision a scenario to where clenbuterol would be used in a food animal. You would lose money. Like you would lose money doing this. It doesn't even make sense. But assuming that's the case, these animals are generally going to be given a much lower dose than a human. And here's what you have to remember. Most of it's metabolized immediately, right? Most of it's metabolized immediately. You've got trace amounts left in the animal that the animal would test positive for, right? What's our detection time on clen? Under the best WADA testing right now, about 10 days. So if someone comes off of it, it should only pick it up after 10 days. I'm going to get to that in a minute. It's a more likely story here of maybe he stopped taking it 12 days before his voluntary test and it just hadn't quite traced all the way out. Because normally it's about a 10-day detection time for full amounts. Voluntary test, he thought he was clear. But here's the thing. All right, most of us metabolize in the animal. There's only trace amounts left in the animal. So people say, well, if you consumed trace amounts from the animal, which is what they would find, you would have trace amounts. No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. Because here's the thing, these trace amounts that are left inside this animal wouldn't be 1 dose for a human. It would be way less than a dose spread through the meat and blood and organs of a 2,000-pound animal. Now, assuming you ate 10 pounds of meat of this animal, do the math here. 2,000 pound animal, 10 pounds. Hell, I'm going to get a calculator out myself. Let's do this. Let's do some maths, as they say in Great Britain. Calculator. All right. 2,000 divided by 10. So 200. So 0.5%. 0.5% of the animal is eaten if you consume 10 pounds. That means you got 0.5% of all of the tiny trace amount of clen that was left in there. So less than 1% of what remained in this animal, this trace amount, which the animal would test positive for, you consume 0.5% of that because you ate 10 whole pounds of this animal. 10 pounds of meat is a lot of meat to eat in a week. Yeah, he's a high activity boxer. He might be eating 10 pounds of steak a week. Might be. I don't think that's unreasonable for an athlete. A lot of people say, what, that's crazy. No, it's not unreasonable for an athlete. I eat over 10 pounds of meat a week. Maintain my svelte fighting weight. But, yeah. Eats all of that. Well, half of that's going to be metabolized immediately by your liver and everything else. So, you see where we're going with this? Most of it's going to be metabolized. There's no way. There's no way you're going to have trace amounts still in your body from eating 10 pounds of meat off of an animal with trace amounts in its body that was given this. All right, this is not how it works. They're not dosing these animals with 1,000 times the human dose. It would kill the animal. The animal would be dead within an hour. All right, it doesn't work that way. They're not doing that. These animals are given very small amounts. Almost nothing is left. Not even anywhere near 1% of what a human would take is left in this animal. And you're eating less than 1% of less than 1%. And then most of that's going to be metabolized and then out of your system immediately. So the idea that this is even remotely possible is about like the odds of again, someone testing positive for trend because it was put in cattle they ate. It's never going to happen. If that happened, people would be getting popped for that all the time too. Because guess what? Most of your meat in the United States, most of your beef is grown on trenbolone acetate. Well, that has a detection time of 3 to 6 weeks under WADA testing. Do you see any athletes getting popped for eating beef from Texas for trend? No, of course not. It's the same reason. There's not going to be enough there to get into your system to test positive. It's not going to happen. You know why you don't see any of these athletes getting popped for trend? Because it's terrible for endurance athletes. It's given to all of our animals. All of our beef in the United States, almost all of it is grown on trend. Not one person ever tests positive for trend for it. In fact, there are people who, when they get put on steroid tests, like police officers and other people, none of them get popped for it either. Why? Not because it's not there. It's just not given to the animals. Because you can't get enough to test positive, and it's not useful for most athletes. Powerlifters, bodybuilders, that's about it. Anyone who needs conditioning is not going to use trend. See where we're going with this? The reason he tested positive for it is this is a very, very popular drug in his particular sport. Boxers, track and field, sprinters, baseball players. This is popular for their sport, and it has been for a long time. It was banned specifically because of track and field. So he just happens to test positive for that one, and it's used less commonly, way less commonly than certain anabolics that are banned, that aren't used by athletes in their sports. Could it just be that a bunch of these athletes from Mexico are all using clen at the same time? I think that's a more likely story. Could it just be that he didn't time his dose coming off right, or their detection methods improved slightly, and they can now detect it 3 or 4 days longer in trace amounts versus the normal amount they would have tested had they popped him the week before? That's a far more likely story. And it's just hilarious, and that's hilarious. And here's the thing. He's got doctors to sign off on it, and they're saying, well, this is hypothetically possible, so you have to let our guy go, or he's going to end up suing them. He's going to produce some beef somewhere that's got some clan in it, and he's going to get away with it. Because that's the reality of it, guys. But you need to remember, at the end of the day, drug testing in sports is all about politics. It's all a dog and pony show. They don't really want to catch athletes. These companies involved in this want sports to make money. They need athletes to perform, but they need to have a propriety. They need to try to pretend that they've got some morality in place so that it doesn't hurt the image of sports, to promote fair play in sports. But that's not reality, guys. That's just a fantasy that's being sold to you. And at the end of the day, he'll get away with it. He'll probably get away with it. And they'll accept it, even though they know it's nonsense. Everyone with common sense who knows anything about this stuff knows it's nonsense. But it is what it is, guys. That's how sports work. There's money involved. And as long as they can have their dog and pony show and say, hey, see, our sports are clean. We test, and there are occasionally mistakes that happen, but we sort it out. It gets fixed. And it's business as usual, and everyone gets entertained, everyone makes money, and all of our athletes are bigger, stronger, faster, run faster, jump higher, punch harder. That's the real world. And there's no money in making our athletes slower and weaker. No one's making money if that happens. No one wants to watch that. People want to be entertained. They want to see superhuman performance. Real spit right there. Alright, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.